Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name is David Wheatley. We're here to talk leadership in small, bite-sized and practical chunks. Enjoy. Welcome to this episode of the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined again by Judy Brown and Rick Eigenbrod, two wonderfully experienced organizational development consultants and consologists. That should be a new word, I think. And today we're talking about letting go and thinking about those transitions that we go through and how hard it is to let go of where we've come from in order to create the space to get to where we want to go. So this episode was prompted by some work I was doing around the idea of letting go and thinking about letting go, that when people get promoted, that they get promoted because they're great at doing something, but the job that they get promoted to is different to the job that they were great at. And so as a leader, our role is to create the environment for others to be successful at doing the thing that we used to be great at. In fact, we're probably still great at. And so this transition, this challenge of letting go, it's hard because, hey, we were good at the old thing. We're probably still better than some of our people are at the moment. And we're not sure how to do the new role yet. And so the natural tendency is to pull back into the old role, which we're really comfortable at. And so the way these longer episodes work is I quite often have something that's swanning around in my head, and I throw it out to my two esteemed colleagues who join me today, Judy Brown and Rick Eigenbrod, and them in their semi-retirement have more time to digest and pass these things around and use their vast wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience to synthesize some answers and some thoughts into what's about to be about a 35-40-minute conversation. So this idea of letting go, Judy, where are we at? How do we help people let go and get more comfortable with letting go?
Well, I think one of the things we have to do is get more comfortable with letting go ourselves. And what kicked into gear for me, I love this term, being semi-retired, because I feel like I'm pretty busy for semi-retired, and Rick too. What I suddenly got an urge, I suppose in the last 2 or 3 weeks, to begin to thin things out. I lecture myself all the time about how important it is to thin things out, but for some reason I got super motivated to do that, and I started pulling out files and getting rid of things I didn't need. And I said to a young colleague of mine, I love having younger colleagues because they have these great ideas. I said, I'm thinning things out. And she said, surprised me because she's 20. I thought, this is just somebody in my generation who's into this thinning things out stuff. And she said, I really love thinning things out because I learn about myself. I learn about who I am. And that really startled me. I thought, what does she mean by that? And I realized, and perhaps this is true of the dilemma of the leader who knows the old job but is stuck with the new job and keeps sliding back into the old job, is that the process of thinning things out invites us into a conversation with ourselves about who were we then and who are we now. So as I looked through files, I thought, that was wonderful work. I really enjoyed that, but I'm not doing that now. That's not me now. That was me then. And so I'm going through these multicolored files and thinking, that was me then. This is me now. And it struck me that Rick often uses this language of getting current with ourselves, how important it is to pay attention to what's going on with us, and as a way of getting current with who we are now. And I think there's something in this process of needing to slow down and take a breath, maybe when we make a transition from one job to another, from one stage in our life to another, to take a breath and say, wait a second, the invitation here is not to be flip-flopping between the old and the new, but to have a deeper conversation with ourselves about who is the me now, and what possibilities does that open. One of the things that I do, which when I started doing it seemed a little crazy, I started a file. It's a yellow file, so I'll keep my eye on it, and the tab has a big no on it, and in that I put all the things I say no to because that's a way of reminding myself, first of all, that I have, and it's an important capacity, I have the capacity to say no to things that are not me now, and to keep track of that, to log that in the same way I would log new opportunities, because all the no's open a door for a different kind of possibility, because I said no to something that's the me that used to be me. So that's what's on my mind about this dilemma that perhaps each of us has in over and over again in our lives.
So I think
And
that framing of me now versus me then
yes,
gets at both the question that I'm raising and a whole lot more, whether it be, I immediately went to thinking about clearing out my closet downstairs and holding up every shirt and saying, is this me now or is this me then? And maybe get rid of the me then shirts until
right.
it comes round to that 1980s party and I have to pull out all my me then shirts again. But that sense of me now versus me then in terms of changing jobs, changing roles, clearing up your office, whatever it
Right.
may be, this
Changing
is
clothes.
about this letting go piece of
Right.
things.
Yes, it is. And
Rick?
it's, yeah, Rick, want to wade in?
Yeah, I was thinking about what this notion about really what's at stake. And Judy, I think you're raising and David's raising the question, invites us to zoom in, if you will, to when we're sort of faced with the question of letting go. I think it invites us to zoom in some way on what is it that's really at stake here. What is it that we're being invited to let go of? And I think if we look more closely and zoom in, we'll find that it's actually way more complicated, it's more layered, it's more nested. So just a quick example, to use David's shirt example. Is it letting go of a shirt, or is it letting go of memories? Is it letting go of a you used to be, et cetera, et cetera? And so for a leader, when we're asking them to let go of, say, taking over or doing a job at a level that you're really paying somebody else for, and we're asking you to step into the new me, what is it we're asking you to let go of? And what's really layered underneath it? Sense of self. What's really layered is underneath it is how I deal with discomfort, my relationship to discomfort. David, you said we have to get comfortable with discomfort. I would take an opposite point of view. I would say we are paying you too much to seek comfort. What I am paying you for is to have a different relationship with discomfort. And that what's nested here is underneath letting go is a challenge to you in terms of how are you going to engage and relate to novelty, discomfort, unknowing, vulnerability, et cetera, as you step into this new role without all the sort of security features you you brought with you in the old role. And then I guess there's one other piece is, what is it that I gain when I zoom in? If I look really closely, I have one appreciation for why I'm resisting, right? And secondly, I might see that it's more complicated and I have more compassion for myself. And secondly, I may see that there's something to be gained as well as letting go. At the simplest level, to beat an imagery to death, David gets rid of the shirt and he gets room in the closet. Judy,
And so
you had a great one about the boat.
Oh yeah, I had coffee with my neighbor this morning, with our topic on my mind. And she says to me, we're thinking of getting rid of the boat. And we're all here on a creek. And so and she said, we just don't use it much. And it's really expensive. And Ray has to go out and, check the engine and check the water and the bilge and everything. And it's kind of exhausting. And I said to her, I said, if you got rid of the boat, other things would be possible. And she said, yes, but we're the kind of people who have a boat. I love that phrase. We're the kind of people who have a boat. But then I noticed she had bought a beautiful set of outdoor furniture that's out also facing the river, facing the dock where the boat still is at the moment. And it's beautiful and it's comfortable. And I said, Kate, that's the new you already in place, with being able to sit comfortably, not on the boat, but on this lovely furniture and live by the river. So sometimes I think, without realizing what we're doing, we begin to edge our way to the new us, but we're still holding on to elements of the old us.
I guess that's it. It's not about the people's inability to let go. It's how do we speed up that letting go? Because there seems to be that resistance slows it down, doesn't it? So that hanging on to the boat, and yet what you're pointing out is, even, hey, you get rid of the boat, you get a better view from those new chairs that you've got, but it's that resistance because of the sense of we're the kind of people who have a boat.
Yes.
And so it's not necessarily saying it's not going to happen, but and I think back to the work experience. If I'm a manager and I'm going to a VP role, I have to let go of the manager role to step into the VP role. But there was a time when I was a frontline supervisor and I was going through the same transition into a manager role. But now that manager place is my place of comfort.
Yes.
And which then gets to Rick's point of that, approaching discomfort in a different way, because discomfort is an opportunity, it's learning, it's all of those things.
David, I really like what you're saying, and I think what it brings home is, and again, I'll be a slightly different take on things. I think this notion of beating back resistance, I take a different tack, because part of what we know is, and this, forgive my clinical background, is we have this ability to maintain a homeostasis. So if we push back on the resistance, some part of us will rise. We know this, and you're shaking your head. We know this personally. We know this in organizations. Some part of the system will respond to maintain that, to reestablish the homeostasis. And I think one of the things I try to do, and I invite folks to do, is to understand what resistance is all about, and to have a respectful relationship to it. Resistance is there to protect the organism from being overwhelmed by anxiety, discomfort. Freud talked about this. That it's really it is a functional part of us that we have as an organism that protects us from feeling overwhelmed by anxiety. So if we understand that, then we can ask different questions. And I think that's one way in, is rather than to sort of go at the resistance in a full frontal assault, is to be curious about it.
Right.
What's really at stake for me here? What's triggering the anxiety? When do I really notice it the most? What is it that I'm really uncomfortable about? And I think that by doing that, we don't enable, if you will, or put energy into the resistance. And that we begin to see things that we couldn't, like, oh, wait, here's a possibility, or this isn't really about this is about that. And that discomfort becomes more of a natural consequence of what, I love the phrase one of the authors came up with: we are paid or not, we are paid in our lives as leaders, we are experienced as human beings, necessary losses. right? And if we made a quick list, I mean, let's just play here for a second. In 15 seconds, and I invite our listeners to do the same thing. In 15 seconds, write down as many things as you can in your life that you know you have trouble with and tend to hang on to. Hanging on being another way of saying inability to let go. Just very quickly, what are the things you have trouble that you know will come up over and over and over again that you have trouble letting go of?
This is where we edit the pause out of the podcast at some point, and people can hold it for themselves. But
okay,
one of the biggest ones in response to that, Rick, just to give a starter, is stuff.
Yeah, stuff. All three of mine were stuff.
For me, one of the hardest things for me to give up is relationships. There are times when I know the nature of that relationship is such that I have to let it go. And in the work I do with folks who are very successful, one of the things that just kills them is the sense about people. There are certain people in my family or around me that cannot go with me into who I am and what my world is now. And I have to let it go. And letting go of those relationships feels so hard. The other one comes up with me is letting go of trying to protect my children from the very experiences that will grow them up. Oh, not just my children, my employees.
Right.
So protecting and fixing other people.
Right. You know, I think also the difficulty of letting go of mindsets. I'm listening to our conversation and I'm sitting here in my relaxed clothes that I use for my 45-minute walk in a swing chair. All right. Because I've decided I'm no longer, I'm just going to be comfortable. I'm going to live my life in a swing, not live my life in a rocking chair or in a desk chair or whatever. But I realize still in my mind, and it's very hard for me to give this up, is that you are judged by what you wear. That goes all the way back to the Pan American flight uniform. You're judged by what you wear. And so yesterday, when I was working with all CEOs from this chair, I had on my formal dress clothes, my business clothes. And and I hadn't thought about this before. It's the mindset that's such a trouble as the stuff. I'm the kind of person who is a professional, and therefore I dress in professional clothes. I don't dress in my walking clothes.
But that's interesting because I'm the same. I'm wearing a black t-shirt here for this record, and this is what I wear quite often in a Zoom meeting. But I went to a client yesterday and I'm wearing a collar and long trousers because that's what's expected. It's bizarre that I'm doing this. There's an analogy I've used quite a bit that is the idea of going from quarterback to coach. And if you're the quarterback, you're in the game, you're right at the heart of it, you're in every play, you're the person that gets the accolades. And then the following day you retire and become the coach. That's the transitions that I see quite often, is when that person goes from being the expert and the star to now I'm in this new job and I've never done it before. And the temptation is to run on the field and push the new quarterback to one side and say, no, I meant like this, because you can do it better than them. And if I switch codes for a minute, one thing I've noticed in what I call proper football is that sometimes when a player retires and becomes the coach, you'll see them on the sidelines in like a three-piece suit, a waistcoat and everything, and leather-soled shoes. And I wonder how much of that is to help them let go of what they used to do. And
yes,
because if they try to kick a ball, the odds are they're going to slip on the grass and go head over heels. And so there's something about their presence as they're stood there in a suit and a tie that reminds them of their new job. And
right.
and this goes to this, I think we're in violent agreement with a lot of this, that we have to let go of what's gone and we have to step into what's coming. That me versus the new me versus the me then piece of it. And that's just one example of what some people do to try and make that transition smoother. As well as, Judy's saying, I'm struggling to let go of how I dress because I'm a professional and I dress professionally, and yet 2 out of 3 of us are dressed for walking today.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the things I'm vulnerable to, I have to remind myself over and over and over to let go of, is the notion of falling into performance mode. My whole life, our whole lives, we are used to being in performance mode and evaluated on our quote unquote performance. And I think what's true for this role that Judy and I play, and you play, David, is it's not about performance. And this thought came to mind in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Spain, is don't perform, serve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that leaders move, and we've heard about servant leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But I think at a very personal level, a lot of the leaders that we work with, they have always been the high performers. They've been the smartest kid in the class. They're the ones who always know the answers. And to move away from that sense of self, that performance mode, into this and learn the skill sets that are so different that it's going to take not to have me be the highest performer, but to grow the highest performers. To move from performer to server is so challenging and layered about what we have to let go of.
And it's
David,
rooted in being authentic.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And just finally figuring out that to be completely present and aware of yourself and of others may be the greatest good that you can do. David, you had a term for the people that we piled everything on during COVID. What was it? You've got an initial for them.
The GSDs.
Yeah,
The polite version is get stuff done. Yes.
Right, that's a very polite version. I mean, that's in some ways, it's that kind of transition of thinking that we wrestle with as parents. We wrestle with when we have responsibilities in organizations. How do you get out of the way of people and stop getting stuff done? How do you get out of the way so that other people's gifts get fully developed? They may not be the same as your gifts. They may not do it the same way, but so that they have space to develop them. And that takes I'm going to call it discipline and self-control.
Yeah. Which is the other tool that I use with people is, as they've been promoted to a new job, is you're getting that new job on Monday. On Friday, write down everything you did in the old job and give that to the person who's taking over and stop doing it. and then ask the question of the person who you're taking over from to do the same thing, which, it sounds easy, but that it's the stop doing it, the letting go of it, that mental transition, which is that mindset shift that we're all talking about, stepping out of that place of comfort and into the place of curiosity, the getting from the me now or the me yesterday to the me today and tomorrow transition, which is that's an awful lot of my work these days.
If you listen to what we're saying, and I'm going to put slightly different words to it, and David, you just did it. You used and described the dynamic of that transition. If we zoom out now and look at what that's about, we realize that, oh, wait a minute, that is the heart of the dynamic of human development. It's called, in psychological terms, in psychological development terms, it's called integration and differentiation. That's a driving force of human development. I don't do this anymore. I'm not that anymore. I do this now. I am this now. And so I think when we're in these periods of being invited, challenged to make that transition, to let go, it does help to have a larger perspective. That to see oneself and what one's in is not something that's, yes, I feel at a very personal level, but it's larger than me, and it's about my development. And this is my personal in the moment experience of what development really feels like and is about. It's about letting go and taking on. And we know from all the research, that we learn and grow as human beings in the crucible.
Right.
And so that's saying this is part of being human. We're all going to deal with this. And that idea of the transition is just getting used to accelerating through that transition in our own way.
Right. And it doesn't mean that we're incompetent, which brings us to the notion that we tend to have when we're in a new situation of how in the world did I end up here and can I really do it? It means that that is a natural place to be in, and our developmental task is to step toward that, to not try to retreat from it, but to step toward it and realize that it's going to look like sausage making some days, and that's just the nature of it. It may not be pretty, but it's where we need to be.
And that's the concept, that imposter syndrome that you're kind of talking about is
Yes.
really what I had when I started the last job.
Yes.
That now I'm comfortable at and I don't want to let go of.
Right. And I don't want to have to step into this. A younger colleague again said, in order of the imposter syndrome, said we ought to change the language to moments of self-doubt.
Mhm.
And it's just moments. And it's not the sign that we're in the wrong place. It's the sign we're in the right place. And we need to stay there.
Which goes back to the crucible, it goes back to the curiosity, it goes back to the learning. And so the biggest thing is that new version is scary.
Yes.
And that if we can have a larger perspective about the scary, it sort of depersonalizes it. It keeps it from feeling and looking like, and us making judgments about some shortcoming on our part. David, you said something just a few minutes ago. I'll even zoom out a little higher, which is that's our personal version in that moment of the timeless journey of the hero. That this is pan-human, it's cyclical, it's been going on forever. And we, thanks to Joseph Campbell, we now kind of know there are 3 steps. One, there's the call to what? The call away from what was, the separation. And the natural inclination to hold on, King Holdfast, who becomes, by holding on, a pariah to himself and his kingdom. We're called to the journey, to the adventure, to the discomfort, to the dark forest. We enter it, and what we come out with is something that was the reward for taking on that challenge, which becomes a boon for others. And I love that notion of being able to see our own personal struggles in a larger perspective, a human perspective. And in a sense, it allows us to stand for something greater than our own comfort or discomfort.
And Rick, sometimes you've said, and the boon is not only what we bring back for others, but we're bringing back a more fully developed self who is of greater service to others. And I think that's hard to realize at the time when we're dancing as fast as we can in a kind of graceless way and wondering how we'll get through this stage. That kind of normalizing of that, and granting ourselves some grace about the naturalness of the human process.
Amen, Judy. And that, I think one of the pieces you said is, we ourselves become the boon to others. And David, you know this about yourself and your work. You, by going into whatever crucibles you went into, we are here today, each one of us, because we have over multiple times entered the dark forest. And in a way, it's not just what we think, it's who we are that's the boon to others.
I entered the dark forest just this very lunchtime, but it's the woods behind me. But to summarize that, you're really calling out that we don't learn in a place of comfort. And
Right.
so that
we don't grow in a place of comfort. My daughter, who's visiting, we were watching our children go through this. It's like, holy smoke. A friend of mine said, just to extend what you said, David, he said, God, I'm not on the field anymore. I'm on the sideline. I say, with respect to our kids, I said, we're not even on the sideline. We're in the grandstand. And so we were watching this movie about the Women's Baseball League, a league of their own. And towards the end, she leaves, and he says, why are you leaving? And she said, it's just too hard. And he says, yes, and it's the hard that makes it great. And my daughter and I changed that a little bit. And when we are struggling, one of us will say to the other, it's the hard that makes us great.
So, I mean, what we've talked about in the last 35 minutes, to the most part, is that letting go is really about recognizing the me now versus the me then. It's about understanding that it's part of the human function to go through these transitions, whatever they may be, and that it's that stepping into that crucible, stepping into that place of uncomfort, that going to that place where it's hard is the difference maker if you want to be the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And for a leader, I would say, and that's what they pay me for.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, we've solved the world's problems when it comes to the term letting go. Thank you once again to Judy Brown and Rick Eigenbrod for their wisdom leading into this conversation and their willingness to chat openly about it. And we look forward to catching up with you next time.
Terrific. Thank you, David.
Thanks, David.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. My name's David Wheatley. For further information about Humanergy, go to humanergy.com or check out our latest book, What Great Teams Do Great, from all good bookstores. Have a good one. Stay healthy.